I would urge that once again I think once again we put it to the next meeting, and then they ask the committee secretary to just remind us to please ensure we read that. In fact, I just pulled
I want to urge.
I must admit, I only pulled the file.
No, I want to urge members that you do read these minutes, because I think the secretary has done a good job in detailing the deliberations and the key points that came out of the discussions on both sides. So I think it's important, and there are a number of things that will flow from it in terms of matters arising, some which have to do with legislative arrangements and adjustments that we have to make, special select committees that we established, and so on. So I want to suggest then, Madam Secretary, if in fact you could extract from the minutes the action points and have that available to us ahead of the meeting, so members could be guided and assisted in you know, ensuring that the actions that are to flow from our deliberations, in fact, do flow, and that we can get the results that we want from our deliberations, you know, in a timely way. So, yes.
One of the things.
Sorry, AG.
Perhaps we could just defer the item of the minutes, because there are some matters arising that we may need to just discuss, particularly in relation to the move for the support staff, for the itemization of the critical aspects of the reports for consideration for the action steps, etc.
Correct. The only one I would really like us to take some action on, Chairman, is that we have been promising to put a joint select committee to consider, to look at the Protection Disclosure Act, and I think we should put that and the Integrity Commission together. So I think the Joint Select Committee could meet to consider both acts.
Yes. Well, I will.
You don't want that. You want them individually. Okay.
So, AG, would you work with the Minister of Justice in his other capacity to have the arrangements for the Joint Select Committee? Bring the measure to me as leader of the House in my other capacity, and I'll ensure that it is tabled.
Right.
And
the position, Chairman, I will discuss it with AG, but I had given the intimation that once I was finished with a couple of those joint select, especially the NIDS, that was taking up a lot of time, and we're now finished. So I wouldn't mind if we can select the Joint Select Committee and advertise over the Christmas period, so that persons who have any suggestions or concerns can let us have it by early January. And so we would then meet sometime in January and February, that Joint Select Committee, to look at both, one or both acts as the case may be, so that, you know, we can make some decisions in the next fiscal year as the case may be. But we certainly had promised that we would have done this in this fiscal year, and it is still possible, Chairman, if we select the Joint Select Committee before the end of the term.
Thanks for your comments, member. Wearing your other hat, I know that wearing my other hat, together we'll make it happen before this fiscal is over. Perhaps with a little effort, AG, we could have it before this session is over, at least for the empaneling of the Joint Select Committee, and then to do the advertising over the Christmas for discussions in the new year. Not new fiscal now, but new calendar year. I see the ED nodding in acceptance of that arrangement. Very well. Okay, so I think we now will accept the motion for deferment of the minutes. Did I hear the motion? So move, and seconded by.
No, Chairman, my request was to have the item deferred to a later stage of the proceedings, but not at this later stage.
Yes.
Very well.
That's what we're asking for, the formal motion.
In that case, I second
Yes, indeed.
the motion for deferral.
Very well, very well. So now we move to the review, the continuation of the review of the recommendations from the Integrity Committee for the year 2021. And I think we were focused on pages 17 through 23 of the report. And we had covered some grounds. We dealt with a number of areas. And I think that the area that we wanted to focus on more today was the section dealing with the declaration form. So the floor is open for discussion. Perhaps the executive director might want to lead off on that, and then the committee follows through.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, members of the Honorable Inter-Commission and Parliament Oversight Committee, we are privileged to be appearing before you today. And Chair, I would like, on behalf of my colleagues, to associate ourselves with the remarks that you made about the importance of these proceedings. Our mandate, by virtue of the Integrity Commission Act, is to ensure the highest standards of probity and integrity across the public sector in Jamaica. We, therefore, it follows, it stands to reason, and I always say this, that we too must be held to account. And to that extent, we fully subscribe to this process. I think it's a unique creature of our law, but we are fully supportive of it. It gives us an opportunity to account to Parliament and the people of Jamaica in terms of what we're doing and how effective and efficient we are, and hopefully to answer any questions about any concerns that yourselves as the representatives of the people may have about what we do and how we do it. So we are fully committed. If you would permit me, Chair, just a few other opening remarks. I would like to convey to yourself and the honorable members of the committee greetings from our chairman, Honorable Mr. Justice Seymour Panton, and the other members of our commission, the Integrity Commission. I would like to also introduce those members of the team that are here today. And first, I want to start with the lady who is on my right. Her name is Shelly-Ann Lutas, and she's my assistant. And she sits on my right for a good reason. She's my right hand. And the last meeting, I inadvertently failed to introduce her. So I apologize to her and I apologize to the committee. So I present her, Ms. Shelly-Ann Lutas. We have our 4 statutory directors with us here today. Craig Beresford, who needs no introduction. None of them need an introduction, but I will go through. Craig, who is our Director of Information and Complaints and who handles the issue of statutory declarations. Kevin Stevenson, our Director of Investigation. Keisha Prince, our Director of Corruption Prosecution. And Mr. Rand Evans, our newly appointed Director of Corruption Prevention, Stakeholder Engagement, and Anti-Corruption Strategy. We also have with us Ms. Fiona McLaren, who is our Manager of Licensing and Asset Divestment and Acquisition. Mr. Maurice Barrett, Manager, Anti-Corruption Policy and Strategic Engagement, Corruption Prevention. Ms. Rosemary Leng, our Chief Accountant. And last but not least, Mrs. Joeth Jones-Hall, our Manager of Declarations, Information and Complaints. Again, she is a person who manages that very important unit. We are committed, Chair and members, to go through the remainder of the recommendations that we have, and as you have accurately pointed out, they're contained in pages 17 to 23 of our last annual report. I should also want to point out to you, though, that coming out of the last deliberations on October 14, there were 3 discussion items which were very engaging. And to ensure that you had the benefit of our considered positions, the Commission took the decision to prepare a paper addressing the issues having to do with the declarations. And that document was tabled in the House of Representatives on November 2. We have brought copies with us, hard copies, which we will circulate. Craig? And they were also subsequently tabled in the Senate. But in the interest of full disclosure and to ensure that we placed your honorable committee in a position to have a fulsome understanding of the issues and to give you responses to the concerns that you have, we thought that it would be best that we prepare that document. So I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read it, but it was formally tabled in both houses of Parliament. So we have brought that to you. Now, the other two issues which garnered some significant discussion in the October 14 proceedings had to do with the Auditor General as a member of the Integrity Commission, a statutory member of the Integrity Commission. We have chair and members of the committee again decided to prepare a position paper on that issue, and this is the considered position of the chairman of the commission, Honorable Mr. Justice Seymour Panton. And on behalf of the chairman of the commission, I will now circulate a copy of that document. And because it raises significant public interest issues, we will also issue it as a media release. But we're going to give you copies of that. And then the third item, which was a subject of some significant discussion, and which is also of a significant public interest matter, has to do with the so-called gag clause, Section 53(3) of the Integrity Commission Act. As you're aware, the Commission, in its 3 annual reports, have articulated a position with respect to that provision, and we know that it's something which has generated a lot of discussion in the public sphere as well as before this committee. So the Commission also thought that it would be prudent for it to document its considered positions on the matter. So we have prepared a document which we are now circulating, and it's a formal position statement of the Integrity Commission with respect to Section 53(3). In summary, we believe that we have advanced some positions which, having regard to those positions, we are respectfully submitting to this honorable committee and to the Parliament of Jamaica a recommendation that that provision be repealed from the Integrity Commission Act. And we will also, because of the significant public interest behind this matter, we'll also be issuing that document as a media release. If there are no questions, Chair, we are now quite prepared to accede to your directions and to proceed to consider the matters that you would deem fit from the annual report or from the document that was circulated with respect to the statutory declarations, which you have had perhaps some time to read.
Sir. Sir.
Chair, the 3 substantive matters that the Executive Director has raised are big issues which require proper deliberation and time. And I would, time to read and digest. There are weighty matters which can have a significant bearing on how we proceed. So I would ask that we get some time to deliberate and have the Commission probably come back early in the new year for a fulsome discussion on the matters.
Absolutely. The chair finds favor in the position enunciated by Member Robinson and consequently rule in that regard. Did the AG want to say something? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I was seeking clarification. The member is not asking that the presentation not be done, but that the deliberation not be concluded.
Not at all. I think what the member is saying, and I concur, is that the 3 points that have been raised and the document to support it, circulated by the Commission, is of great moment, but it's weighty and requires deeper consideration by us. Therefore, we would defer discussion today and to give ourselves opportunities to read it, to examine it carefully, and then to deliberate next year when we come back. Okay, very well. So I think the matter of the declaration form, which would constitute much of what today's discussion should be, is before us. And Mr. Christie.
Chairman, I know one of your 3 reports, one dealt with supporting the concerns that I indicated on the last occasion. But on the last occasion, I just intimated that on this occasion, we'll go more fully into concerns with respect to the declaration. So with your permission, Chairman, I'd like to just go through some of the concerns that really have been expressed to me, not only by members of Parliament, but by members who work in the public sector, who have the same form to fill out. In other words, when I circulated it among senior public officials, they find the form somewhat invasive. They really think that to ask the public sector to fill out this form, that it becomes almost a burden every year. And that is why a lot of letters pass back and forth between the Integrity Commission and themselves. And there are members in the public sector, executive director, who feel that if they have to fill out this form, they would rather to leave the public sector rather than to be asked to do all these things. I'm going to just indicate, as I did last time, that you have added some matrix to be put into the form that we presently have. But apart from these additional matrix that you have to put in, there are even the ones that you presently have, there are concerns which, I would express. I did make the point last time that you have added the form particulars of all the declarant's children. Now, this to my mind seemed to be quite invasive, and I'm not too sure what the Commission is trying to achieve by doing that. I had a quick glance of the brief you sent, where it talks about commingling of assets and so on. The truth of the matter is that our children want to live their own independent lives. And the little I know about corruption, if you want to be corrupt, you're not going to put asset in your children. You don't, as best as possible, as I understand it, you're not going to necessarily implicate your children or want your children to be implicated. So the question in respect of that, now after you ask all the declarant's children, you may well ask for all the declarant's siblings and business partners and friends. Where do we stop? So, I can understand you asking for the declarant and his spouse and children under their control to all assets and so on to go forward. But to ask for adult children, some of these adult children, my eldest daughter is in the 40. Youngest is 32, I think. To ask for them, their TRN, and for you now to be asking to investigate them, it seems to me that, my children will say, why are they asking the bank for my account? It just seems a bit invasive to say, your elderly children who are living independent lives, don't depend on you for anything. In fact, before long, we will be dependent on them, right? So I say, believe me, you're going to have great difficulty having that particular section to be considered. I may jump a bit and say, for instance, you have number 20, politically exposed person. Now, when you ask a senior director in the public sector, in a ministry, to say which politically exposed person they are involved in, they have to name nearly all the parliamentarians, all the councillors. Where do you stop? In other words, when you say politically exposed, particulars of relationship, even the parliamentarians, where do we go? I am actively engaging at various policy level, in various levels with colleagues. Do I have to declare which ones I have any relationship with, what sort of relationship I have, you know, do I have a business relationship with them and so on? I just feel that, you know, number 20 is not going to get the support of parliamentarians because, and I can assure you that parliamentarians and members of the public sector are totally opposed to that number 20. I skip a bit, and you know, and I look, for instance, at number 5. Number 5, you have added a section there. Cost of any improvement on the property during the reporting period. My God, man, you own your house, and you're going to tell me I must declare what improvements I have made to my house. That's number 5. You have added to what we already had. Costs of any improvement on the property. Not only your house, but any property you might have some connection with. But just consider your house. Your family is constantly improving it. You're constantly putting in a new sink, a new toilet bowl. You paint over your house for Christmas. Where do you stop? I mean, I can understand if you say cost of any improvement above 1 million or 5 million. You get me? But not cost of any improvement, because if I fail to show that I've repainted the house and it cost me 200,000, if I fail to put that in, then in that voluntary declaration form, I would have breached. So the question is, it just a cost of any, you know, not significant improvement, any improvement. So that if I just paint the fence or fix the fence and I didn't put that in, then I would be in breach. So you can say cost of accumulated costs of improvements that does not exceed $1 million or $5 million, as the case may be. But it cannot be any improvements, because that could include anything 5,000 or more. So you will see that that column, with due respect, doesn't make sense. Then even asking in the old form, at same number 5, the address. You have the volume and folio number already. Why do you want the address? Fine. Then you also want the estimated value of these properties. It's a waste of a column. Because quite frankly, over the years, I just put any value that come to my head. In all sincerity, to ask for an estimated market value of property you have. For the vast majority of persons in the public sector here, it is extremely difficult. And if I give a value of 50 million from a property that I own, and it really valued 200 million, anyone who look at it say, that can't be less than 200 million. And the estimated that I give is 50 million. You're going to come to me and say it's a breach because I am trying to fool you. So to ask a declarant to estimate market value, for example, of anything, it just doesn't make sense. I understand the cost of acquisition. It was acquired, yes, no problem. How much it costs? I understand improvement beyond a certain figure on a regular basis. But then to ask for the estimated market value. I purchased my house in 1987, my home. Every year we improve. Every year we improve. But the value, when I purchased it, I mean, is laughable. That's the cost of the acquisition. What it is worth now is not really of any interest to me. What it is worth now is my home. So over the years, if you look, all sort of value I give, 100 million, it might be worth more than that. But I may put in 100 million just to fill that column. All I'm really saying, that column, asking the declarant to estimate a value is really not useful. Then you see member of the Integrity Commission. Let's go through quickly. Number 2, the cost of acquisition. When you go, I'm not denying if you purchase stocks, bonds in recent time during the fiscal year or maybe over the last 5 years or so, you may know the cost of acquisition. Most of the shares I own were purchased when they went on the stock market, NCB shares in 1987. I have purchased more, but the original shares, I wouldn't remember, I think they went for $2.95 per share, but they have been split over the years. So to ask what is the cost of acquisition, I really have to put, don't know. But then you might say, I must go and investigate with my stockbroker how much it was in 1987. Is that really fair to ask me what, and suppose I can't get that information? Many of the stocks that I have were purchased 10, 15 years ago, but you have no put that in, the cost of acquisition. For me now to go and check out when I bought them 10, 20 years ago, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible. So I'm saying one has to be careful. When you look at number 3, other financial assets held by declarant, spouse, and children, such as cash, check, or other financial assets. With due respect, this is so invasive. Because if you say the asset over 500,000, I can understand. But when you ask other financial assets, how much? You might have a number of watches, for example. People might have 2 Rolex watch, which, whatever. I just feel that that particular section, asking for financial assets held by declarant, spouse, and children, that you should put some value, that it should be assets over a certain amount, 500,000, as the case may be, $1 million, what have you. And then number 4, shares held in private companies, partnership, or other entities by declarant, spouse, and children. And it also adds such information regarding the operations of the company and its asset, liabilities, income, and expenditures. Many of these companies that you're involved in, you may have a very small number of shares in them. To ask the company to give you the expenditure of that company would be extremely difficult, because you're asking for the expenditure during the year. It's like the improvements to your property. To ask the company what expenditure did they engage in. I just think that that is unnecessary. I can understand you get the financial report of the company in which you're involved in, but then to add that you must go and put in what expenditure the company did. It is in the financial report. So if you get an income and asset or audited statement or financial report from the company, that should be enough. But when you detail asset, liabilities, income and expenditure, what you should ask for, instead of all of those details, is a financial report from the company. And let the company detail income, expenditure. Fine, but I just think that is asking for too much. I dealt with number 5. Number 6, monies invested in loans, mortgages, or business ventures, including crops and livestock by declarant spouse and children, beneficiarily or legally owned. With due respect, this again seems to me such a wasted section, because you have been asking already for your income, you know, in various sections. This have been dealt with by other sections. So now to go and ask, you will see that various sections dealt with that already. And I mean, there's almost a duplication. For instance, I just dealt a while ago with, you know, other financial assets in number 3. When you look at number 8, assets held in safety deposit boxes by declarant spouse and children, estimated market value. You know, I really don't know what rings and chains my wife have. But every now and then I see she open the safety deposit box, and I see a lot of, I mean, chains, gold chain, and maybe a few, few other brooches and so on. Are we to declare those? I mean, and give the estimated value of all the chains and the rings and brooches that are held in safety deposit boxes? Oh, my God, man. You know, this, to my mind, your wife or your spouse will really ask, what you getting involved? What you want to know for? Right? When you look again at number 9, insurance policy, no, before I get there. Number 7, particulars of motor vehicles owned or by or on hire for any period or on loan for a period in excess of 2 months to the declarant spouse and children, local and abroad. My God, man. My children, I mean, might be traveling or might be spending holidays in abroad. They might rent a car for 3 months. They might not even tell me. And if that is done and you found out, then I have breached. I would have breached because I should have reported that one of my children leased a car for over 2 months. Is that necessary? I just don't wonder why you'd want to know about whether the declarant, the spouse, or the children rent a car. I mean, my wife might be over there assisting the child with her granddaughter, and she might rent a car for 2-3 months while assisting the granddaughter, the baby just born, assisting the mother. Am I to say, well, did you rent a car for over 2 months to make sure I comply with the law? You know, I just think it is a bit invasive. That is totally unnecessary. I can understand you purchasing a vehicle, or you have a vehicle on hire purchase for an extended period of time. But why say over 2 months? Just say, have you purchased, or do you have a vehicle on hire purchase? I understand that, because instead of buying the vehicle, you may well have it on hire purchase. But you just to rent a car, which I suspect people do regularly if they have extended holidays or they're spending time with family members. And then number 9, insurance policies held by declarant spouse and children. 2 columns raises issues: face value, surrender value. I wouldn't know what the surrender value is. I wouldn't even know what the face value is. And for us, and I'm not denying, you might well say you can get that from the insurance company. But is that really necessary? Is that really necessary? I don't know. I mean, declaring that you have an insurance policy, declaring you have a, isn't that enough? Why should you be asking year after year for you to get the face value and the insurance and the surrender value? I just think, again, it is invasive. I mean, I don't know, because frequently I may do it, but you ask a person in the public sector who may have several, I mean, I stopped buying insurance long ago, right? But there are many people, when I was young, I bought lots of insurance just in case anything should happen, my children can get it. So there are many younger members of the public sector who, to prepare for their children, they buy a whole set of insurance policies. I just feel that an imposition is being put on them to be able to get all of that information, acquisition, yes. How much is the insurance policy? You should know what they are. But to then ask them for face value and surrender value, I just think that is invasive. Then, look at this other number 11. Well, number 10, properties, any other property owned by declarant, spouse, and children, local and abroad. Purchase price, acquisition price, not a problem. But here again, you're asking for the estimated, declarant's estimated market value and the currency. I think that's a waste of a column, because anything you put there, the declarant will tell you, I really believe that was the value. But then you may ask to swear again that that is the right market value that you're putting. And the declarant has no idea, or may have no idea of the real market value. So I just think that that column, estimated, declarant's estimated market value, you see that regularly, is wasting a column, in my view. Because in the value you put there, the declarant will say, that's the value I put. So, that's the position. Number 11, other property beneficially owned by declarant, spouse, and children, being held by a person, company, or other entity other than owner, whether by trust or otherwise. What is the purpose of that? I mean, I can't see how that is going to, and not only that, the property must be put there, the declarant's estimated market value. You take a situation where your spouse, as may happen in my case, she owns trust property in a club, but she is just a trustee, and they give away money regularly, fine. But for her now to be put in that this trust of which she's a trustee has this property, that it is valued so much, why would she want to put that in? Why would she go and tell her other trustees in a charitable trust, as the case may be, that she has to put this in for her husband's integrity report? I just think that we need to look at number 11 again about property beneficially owned by declarant spouse. I think you need to look at that carefully, because sometimes people may set up a trust for you and say you are the beneficial owner, and you don't even know, because the person may well put in their will or put in their personal papers that this is to the children of so-and-so, and they may not know. It is a matter of great concern that people have brought to my attention. Then, number 12, particulars of income for declarant, spouse, and children from employment, rental, investment income, and allowances and all other sources. Gross amount for period under review. Net amount for period under review. What a lot of people are complaining about, believe me, they're complaining about, is that they need an accountant to really submit this form. Not many people can afford an accountant. I have one who gives me an audited of my company, but not many people in the public sector and the salaries that they have can afford an accountant. And this form, as it presently is put, asking for these minute details, is putting the public sector employees under a lot of pressure because they're not able to supply in these minor details. And then at the end of the day, you ask them for a letter to say, revisit the form and make sure that everything you have put there is correct, because they're now complaining about that too, that having submitted what they truly believe is to the best of their knowledge, you would then write and ask them to submit again that what they put in the declaration is true and correct. And they have to go now and check with their accountant, did you give me the right information? All I'm really saying, Executive Chairman and your directors, some of these, what you're asking for, need to be tidied up. What is excess should be removed, like estimated market value. Cost of acquisition, date of acquisition, no problem. Improvement above a certain level, no problem. But then to ask the declarant to estimate the market value, totally unnecessary, totally difficult for the declarant to be able to do. Then one of the concerns I have every year is when you ask to put in your bank account number, and also you want to know the value of shares. I asked my bank, and you require it, for a letter stating how much at the end of the year. You put in the letter, and then my good friend, Ms. Caristel Carr, then write me to say, I must put it in the column. So you want me not only to put it in the column, but I must get a supporting document from the bank, which says the very same thing. I just think you could easily say account amount or not supported by a bank statement. In other words, if I get a bank statement and I actually put there for my stocks and my bank statement, see bank statement. But my good friend who I have met isn't, but I talked to her, Ms. Carr, writes me and say, you have to send back the form. I must put in what I've already sent in from the bank to say these are the accounts, this is the value at the end, 31st of December. From my stockbroker, gives me the value of the shares at the end of the day, at the end of the year, I send it in. But she still wants me to write it out. Is that really necessary? So should we just say or a statement from your bank or your stockbroker detailing the value of the shares at the end of the day? Then, Chairman, number 14. Particles of any property acquired or disposed of by declarant, spouse, or children during the period ending. No problem. You have motor vehicles, you have property, you have sold it for X amount, or you have bought it for Y. But now you put to whom and from whom. So particles of any property acquired or disposed of by declarant. So when I sell my vehicle or my property, I must tell you to whom I sell it? Is that necessary? Or if I buy property from somebody, I must tell you from whom I buy it? Is that really necessary? I have no difficulty telling you or the declarant saying they purchased this property, any property, they should report. Or they have sold this property. What you have done in the past, when I sell a motor vehicle, you ask me, how much was it sold for? And if I forgot to put that in, no difficulty. But for me, for you to ask, to whom did I sell the property? For instance, when I left here as a Speaker of the House, I bought the vehicle. and the market value was quite low. I don't know, in the public sector, and you buy a public sector vehicle. But then you might question, if I bought it for $1 million, for instance, judges, when they, after 5 years, they buy their vehicle. And what they buy it for is reduced by 20% per year, as I understand it. So normally they buy it. I mean, if they say they've paid $2 million for the vehicle, why is it important for a judge to send to you that they purchase it from the Ministry of Justice? Is it really important? Or if they sell it, having purchased it from the Ministry of Justice, they sell it to someone else for $5 million, because that might be the true market value, right? Is that really necessary for you to know from whom you buy it and to whom you sell it? I ask you to look at that, please, because I understand you purchase it for a certain amount, you sell it for a certain amount, but why, to whom, and from whom? Number 15, here again is particulars of any gift received by declarant spouse and children in excess of 100,000. That is something I think, when I discuss it to the AG says that the minister can put the figure. So 100,000 you have in the form. Quite frankly, that's number 15. Number 15 in this. No, right. The point about it, if someone gives you a gift, or if someone invites you to lunch, I mean, they might invite you and your staff to luncheon, and the luncheon is over 100,000. Am I to declare that luncheon and such a day for staff? You understand? 100,000 is too low, but I believe that that figure is something that the relevant minister can put, okay? So 100,000 is definitely too low in terms of a gift. If someone wants to influence a public sector, not 100,000. You're talking like a couple millions of public sector employees. So that 100,000 needs to be looked at. The other concerns is all the details that one has to go into. When you take, for instance, number 18, government contracts or subcontracts awarded to declarant spouse and children. Isn't this a part of your income that should be declared? Why? I mean, when you say... Is
that a fire alarm?
There's something passing by. Right. You know, it seemed to me, when you look, why is this necessary? Quite frankly, I encourage anybody, if you can help it, don't go and get any government contracts. It's really a total waste of time. Shouldn't say it so strongly. But the point is that from where I sit, when people get government contracts, it takes forever to get payment. Fine? And, you know, I don't know of many persons in the public sector knowing how the public sector works. But as far as I'm concerned, these are sources of income. So if there are sources of income and the public sector employees gets a government contract, he should declare it. If he fails to declare it, then you can see he would be in breach. So why are you asking them to detail the government contracts? Just a concern that it seemed to me. First of all, I'm not even too sure if they can get government contracts if you work in the public sector. I don't know. Fine. I don't know how persons would get government contracts working in the public sector. Then you ask a board membership held by declarant spouse and children. Is that really very important? I mean, you know, spouse or children or certainly ministers can't be on boards, but members of parliament may well be able to serve on private boards. Is that important? Why would you require that a member of parliament or a member of the public sector declare which board they're serving on? it just seemed to me that you're asking for a lot, which I'm not too sure adds to the value of the report, your investigations. So I'd really need you to explain a number of the concerns I have, because believe me, there are persons who, especially the ones you have added, have indicated to me they can leave the public sector if they have to go into all of this. And there are members of parliament who will say, when we bring the notice to come, they're objecting to a lot of these. So I know, having raised a few concerns already, you have sent out a brief, which I have not had a chance to read properly as yet, but having expressed each additional ones that you have put in the old form, I urge you to look at them again, and as you have done with all the children, people still not going to accept that, because the question is, what members of the public sector, MPs, will say, that the Integrity Commission is constantly getting more and more invasive. I think people would be very concerned, how is this helping you to invade their personal life and their so on? How is this helping you? There has to be a balance between the invasion into their personal, private lives and what they declare. I mean, to ask people to declare every jewel and the value of every jewelry they have in their safety deposit box, to my mind, just don't seem necessary. Just don't seem necessary. And just to repeat, please examine some of the points I've made so that you can justify it, because when this matter is laid, Chairman, in the Parliament, and members get up and ask, did the Oversight Committee support these things, or did the Oversight Committee raise it with the Commission and ask the Commission to justify this expansive, invasive need for reporting? Because, with due respect, there are members of Parliament, public sector people, who are very, very busy and don't have the resources to employ an accountant to respond. Because they complain all the time, and I'm sure they complain to you about how difficult it is to be able to submit these declaration forms every year. So those are my comments, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments that any member wishes to make on the declaration form before I make a few brief points and then ask Mr. Christie to respond? Member Robinson.
I'm supportive of most of what Member Chuck has said, and I almost feel, as someone who had to confront this issue when I was getting married, it's a real issue. I had to tell my wife before this was a requirement. And my wife is somebody who, when we got married, she was independent and is somebody who earns her own money 10 times me, right? But it almost feels as if we're punishing the people who play by the books with all of the things that we're asking. And we're the people who are engaged in skullduggery. None of this going to uncover it. I tell you with all due respect. The people the people who have done the wrong things, none of this will uncover it. But it is a significant burden with the additions that have been asked. And I think careful consideration, particularly for related parties. You know, when we make a decision to go into public service, we understand the scrutiny, and we understand that you have to open up aspects of your life. But it is difficult for related parties whom, many of whom would say they never signed up for this. And quite frankly, some of the information that is being required, I don't think will assist you in determining whether this person is in breach or not. I support Member Chuck on like valuations. I don't know what my current house is valued at. I can tell you what I acquired it for, right? And if I talk to two real estate agents, they might give me different prices in terms of valuation. How does that determine whether I've done anything right or wrong? So I and my colleagues who saw the paper when it was tabled have expressed those concerns about how invasive it is. And I think there has to be a review of some of the things that are being asked for, and really to assess what the objective is of seeking this information, and does it carry me further in determining whether somebody is in breach or not. I think there are other ways that, and it may be outside the scope of the Integrity Commission. I feel strongly about legislation illicit enrichment as an example that can be used to deal with some of the issues that I believe you're trying to solve with some of these additional questions, where people can explain where they get certain amounts of money from. But it will be a significant burden for those of us like myself who do my report every year on time, comply with everything that you ask me for, and will continue to do so. But it's additional pressure which I don't believe advances the cause of you determining whether someone is acting outside the laws of the country.
I can speak after you, Chairman, unless you want.
No, actually, what I wanted to do is to enable us to complete our discussions within a time frame, as Minister Chuck had indicated. He has a 12:30, and I have a 1 o'clock at the Prime Minister's office. So we wanted to just get members' responses, and then to have your response, Edie Christie, and then we move on. So if it pleases you, yeah.
Chairman, I took the time to read the explanatory note provided by the Integrity Commission for the requested amendments. And just to put on record that I appreciate where the Commission is coming from on some of the issues. I do share the perspective that corruption is a real problem, and that persons who are serving and carrying out important functions in the public interest must be in a place that is almost beyond reproach. I understand that very clearly. I understand the concern of concealment of wealth, of illicit enrichment, and the need to verify that assets have been financed by legitimate income. I don't think there can be any compromise on that if we are fully committed to the goals of shaving off the worst effects of corruption and how that impacts our development and our democracy. At the same time, I note the level of compliance. I think I've been a declarant in different capacity over the years. And while I fully appreciate speaking now as a declarant within the parliamentary group, the importance of scrutinizing the parliamentary group, if for no other reason because of the leadership that is exercised and the tone that is set by what is done or what is omitted. But I think maybe there needs to be a better balance, since the form does not relate solely, primarily, to the parliamentary group. I note the high level of non-compliance, and I match that against issues within broader government and how that impacts the work of government and what needs to be done. And I just wonder sometimes when we move to take on new capacity without fully resolving existing problems, we run into other issues. And I'd like to hear if the form is as it is and the non-compliance is as high as it is, what inquiries have been made about that? Because I've looked comparatively at other jurisdictions, and I find some that are doing much better than we are on corruption and other matters, that their declarations are far simpler than ours, less detail. So the real issue is whether it needs to be as intrusive as it is and as burdensome as it is for you to achieve the goals of monitoring. We have to be careful, and it's almost like a double-edged sword, because part of the challenge is that sometimes what appears to be is not all that is. So the need to get the information about the connected persons or people who are holding the wealth, really for you, I understand that, but other parties also have their privacy rights. And the burden that is being imposed on them. I have found in my experience of dealing with crimes and systems that it is faulty to treat persons under investigation as if they are criminals. Very faulty. And we see the impact of that across government, particularly in revenue, where there is an assumption that every dispute with the revenue, for example, is as a result of cheating or evasion. And the approach taken is one that is horrible for a taxpayer. And then, as Member Robinson has said, you almost feel like you're going after the compliant. So, because the Parliament has a role to play, although the power to make the regulations, in particular to the form, has been delegated to the Commission, but it is not a full delegation. We will have to look at the ask and see how we can achieve the goals of the legislation without the level of intrusion that is disproportionate to the goal that you're seeking to achieve. And we spend some time looking at it bipartisanly across the aisle. And the concerns were very similar. And both sides are committed to the goals of the anti-corruption and the integrity in public life. So I look forward to or going through. But thank you for the explanation. For example, the initial concern about the statutory declaration at the end, because that has its own scheme in respect of penalty. Your explanation puts a different light on it in terms of your electronic declaration system. We'll have to spend a little time going through the ask to strike the balance, because what it is now is more intrusive in our considered view than it needs to be to achieve the goal, even with the explanations given.
Any other? No. So just prior to Mr. Christie's response, I'd like to say that the review that you gave and the explanations for clarification of the various areas that are covered in the statutory declaration form we have read, and I think that in the main we do understand where you're going. The concerns that we have is to enable this 40,449 declarants, and that's not a simple number. It's 40,000 declarants to be able to comply fulsomely and to enable us to have a sense of the true value of the declarations, but more so that the declarations are honest and that they do reflect the state of assets and the liabilities net worth. I think in the final analysis, that's where you want to go. You want to assess net worth on a cyclical basis to determine whether there are any gaps. You're looking for variances and for explanation of these variances if they exist. Now, the essence, as I understand it, of preparing and presenting reports is perhaps just 3-4 simple steps. One is that the process must be easy. Second, it must be simple. So every one of those 40,449 can fill it out without much hassle and give you all the information that you require. And thirdly, it must be efficient, meaning to say it must give you exactly what you really want to make a valued analysis and or audit of the report. And finally, the process must be effective. We lose the value of it if it's not effective. So I think those are the 4 simple characteristics of reporting that will make for the efficiency of the process overall and give us the result that we see. So the members have indicated with reason the extent to which this particular reporting form is convoluted, besides that it asks for things that in some instances are given already and in others are too invasive. In the context of this, I would love to get your response and to see how together we can make it work and to present a document that, as I said, fulfill these characteristics of being easy to comply with, simple in its form, efficient, you know, in its process, and effective in its outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and honorable members. We have listened carefully. I'm not going to do much talking. I'm going to hand over to Director Craig, who has statutory responsibilities on the Integrity Commission Act to address matters having to do with statutory declarations. But I'd just like to make a few preliminary points on behalf of the Commission. We have heard the concerns, in particular, Member Chuck, or Honorable Minister of Justice, has gone to pains to explain, you know, what he regards to some of the issues that he has faced as a declarant and what has been represented to him by other declarants. We're all public servants. Chair, yourself, I think you have elucidated some key guides that we should be mindful of in terms of what is it that we're after. We want to make it simple, but at the end of the day, it must serve its purpose, and I'll speak about what's the purpose of this statutory declaration. Madam Attorney General, we have heard your balanced positions as well, and I'd just like to say the genesis of all of this is nothing which is unique or peculiar to Jamaica. The requirement for statutory declarations arises out of our international treaty obligations, starting with the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. And that was a precursor to the Jamaica Corruption Prevention Act, which specifies the declaration form. And it's important that we recognize this because this statutory declaration is a creature of the Parliament of Jamaica. We didn't create it. And I think that must be explained and understood so that we can say, okay, what was it 10 years ago? I mean, I was a public servant between 2005 and 2012, and I completed it every year. But it goes back decades. It's not, the Integrity Commission is 4 years old next year, so it's not a creature of Integrity Commission. I think what we need to ensure is that we understand what the basic form requirements are, and then what is it that we are asking in terms of additional information. And I hear Member Chuck, you know, the degree of invasiveness. The fact is that the form, to the extent that it's asking us for personal information, is invasive. But that is a standard that countries such as ourselves, who are desirous of complying with international good governance standards and anti-corruption standards. These are the standards that we have signed on to. And going back to the comments made by Honorable Attorney General, we need to be very careful as to how we trod this path. Because if it is that we are appearing to be shying away from declaring our assets, liabilities, and income, we are moving away from international standard. I worked in the Turks and Caicos Islands for 2 years, and I had to complete a similar form. It's a form which is present in every Commonwealth jurisdiction. There's nothing unique about Jamaica. The issues that I think we need to look at, and you're quite right, Chair, using your guidelines, Minister Chuck, is to balance, you know, what is it that we're seeking to what's the objective? And the objective is quite simple, to identify illicit enrichment. Member Robinson spoke about it, but I don't know if he understood that that is what the declaration form is all about, is to identify public servants who have assets or income which they cannot legitimately explain. So the question is, how far do you go in terms of asking questions to ascertain that? We have heard about the unexplained wealth order, which is a creature of the UK laws. It's a similar thing, except that it applies to non-public servants. You know, where did you get that car from? You have a job, but that job you can't afford that sort of thing. So, you know, we're going to confiscate it unless you can explain. And this thing about the statutory declaration, basically what it is to say, well, okay, we're looking at we baseline you when you join the public sector. We baseline you, your income is $10 a year, and you have $10 in assets. And every year we interrogate your assets, liabilities, and income to see what changes there are. And essentially what we're looking for are unexplained changes, or changes which cannot be, you know, you can't account for it with respect to legitimate sources of income. So the suggestion then would be that, you know, you're doing something which is untoward. So it's not, and that's our mandate. It's not something that we have taken upon ourselves. It's a mandate that Parliament has given to us. So, you know, that's the context. And if we appear to agencies like Transparency International, who will do their corruption perception assessment every year, along with 140 countries, and we fall in those rankings because we are perceived as not holding ourselves to these high standards of accountability, or we are lax with our public servants in holding them to account for their assets and income, then we will suffer as a country. And, you know, you can talk about your 2030 goals and this sort of thing, but all this thing ties back in, because if you're perceived to be corrupt, and if you're perceived to be becoming more corrupt, it will have an impact on the other objectives of government. You know, economic growth, advancing, you know, socio-economic positions of our citizens. So, having said that, Chair and members, we are happy to get your feedback, and we are committed to providing you with the responses that you'd want, and hopefully we can get to that place of balance. And we are committed to that, and we understand fully what you have said, that, you know, yes, it's invasive, but we have to accept that it's invasive. It is invasive. And let's face it, you know, the last time I went to the UK, I had to fill out a long form asking me all sorts of things, right? It's invasive, but that is what it takes. It's not a standard which is unique to Jamaica. It's in every Commonwealth country. I can't speak for the United States, but it's in every Commonwealth country. With that, Chair, I will hand over to Director Craig Beresford, who can speak in great detail and in an informed manner with respect to every matter that you have raised.
Right. So we take that response, but I think we all are at one in terms of the outcome. We have no difficulty with that. The process is one which has to become a task that is bearable by everybody, because you would have a problem getting the outcome. We just look at a simpler form that you had, a simpler form than this one. And of the 40,449, only 27,000 complied. And that's 66%. You want 100% compliance. So we're making the point that if it is that a more efficient document is required to give you the result, it must also be a document that is easy to comply with, so you get the full benefit. And all 40,000 odd who are declarants would be able to comply, and to comply in an onerous way and in a cost-effective way. Because I think part of the point that the members are making is that you're going to have to get Pricewaterhouse or Coopers and Lybrand to come and to prepare this document. It is truly asking a lot and invasive. So let us hear from Mr. Beresford, and then we see how together we can create something that will make it useful. What I said, easy, simple, efficient, and effective.
Chairman, may I just, Mr. Beresford, what's it? I forget the name, Craig Beresford. Chairman, I don't want to put Mr. Beresford under pressure necessarily. He can answer no, or he can say he will examine and come back at the next time, as you have done, I haven't had a chance to go through, so some of them may have been responded to, but you could add. But, Chairman, let it never be said that we're not in agreement that asset liabilities, and as Member Robinson intimated, illicit wealth should be exposed, because I think, AG, we know that corruption is a drain. It is something that any country that wants to move forward will have to wipe out. So we are in total agreement. But I must admit, I sometimes wonder if these annual declaratory forms is not utilizing too much of your time, and you should really be spending some more time doing some sting operation or doing some additional investigation. One of the things, not to answer no, Mr. Beresford, but to investigate how many of these, over the 30,000 or more forms that you get every year, what have you been able to discern any indication that a person is in accumulating illicit wealth? Is it really helpful, these declaratory forms? I would like to get an impression, not necessarily know, whether these forms help you in any way to expose declarants. You get me? Because if they do, I can see, but I often wonder every year I put them in. But why am I going through this again? Because I don't know what is this going to do to help you to, if I was corrupt, to expose my corruption. I just keep wondering every year, why am I doing it, okay? I don't know about other persons, but
Proceed, Mr. Beresford.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, honorable members, for your contribution. As you correctly stated, I will not be going through each and every one of the proposed changes, because you have a document before you, and I think it's only proper to allow you time to study, and then you can make further comments. But I just want to clarify a few things, very important. The first thing I want to say, and it's something that we're proud of, Attorney General mentioned the compliance rate. I want to report that our compliance rate has since moved to 71%. Our intention is to take it to 100% by the end of the financial year. What we have been doing is going through systematically through all the public bodies, assessing their compliance levels, and then we're giving them the opportunity to submit their outstanding declarations. So it has been going very well. Well, that report was issued November the 2nd, so we just got the new data only just a week or so ago. 2021.
That's good going, actually.
It's moving because we are continuously assessing public bodies to determine their compliance level. So we're getting cooperation in that respect, and we expect that it will move much further by December. We're looking at hopefully by 81%.
Interrupt you, but I think that helps to make the point.
Yes.
Because if the simple document is being complied with, then,
yes.
you know.
Well, you know, over the years, and I said it at the last sitting, that, you know, persons have not necessarily been taking it as serious as they should. A lot of persons just gave up complying, and because of the same reason why what Minister Struck had stated, that they're wondering what is it that we're doing with the forms. But we are changing our processes now internally, and we will be assessing every single declaration received within a year, and we will utilize technology to assist us. And you spoke about the issue of efficiency. The electronic declaration system, it will not be ready, unfortunately, for this intake, but certainly for 2022. And it is anticipated that it will take you no more than 10-15 minutes to complete your declaration online, because we will have your last declaration with all the information. If nothing has changed, all you need to do is update the balances. And then you can screenshot your bank balances, because everything is online now, attach it, and you send it. We have your declaration. And then we do our third-party check. And utilizing that information, we have procured also an analytical software where we will be able to pull what we want based on the algorithms that we are going to develop. So a lot of things will change going forward, and that is one that is extremely important. But notwithstanding the fact that I won't go through item by item, I just want to clarify a few things, Minister Chuck. For instance, you mentioned the issue about the form, and why is it that you need to attach and also include. But on the form, you are to sign to the accuracy of what you have placed here. If you just attach something, there's no information there. All you have is a supporting document, which is why we insist that you complete it, because that is what you're attesting to. Not what is supported, but what is in the form. And that is the only reason. As it concerns the issue of the children, I can understand the concerns. We're not asking for particulars in terms of their financial information. All we want to know is who the children are, because the asset concealment research points to that. In other jurisdictions, as a matter of fact, in our own jurisdiction, we have found those issues. And if you look at our annual reports, you would have seen that matters would have been referred, and one sits squarely in that realm. And it is not someone below 18, it is someone over, but it was found also. That was the initial finding. So we can't necessarily speak to it generally, because that is an ongoing matter, but it was a part of our report, our annual report, that we made a referral with respect to that. And so it is.
In respect of the request, the new insert, the general consensus is that since children are defined as under the age of 18 years, the information should be required, should only be required and provided for those children who are dependent, children under 18, and those who are dependent on the declarant. That was our review.
But what they have now added, AG, is another section for you to list all your children, that is those over 18, and give their TRN. Suppose they refuse to give their TRN, which they have a right to do. How does the declarant respond?
And that will be a part of the conversation, because...
Right. Has he breached? Because...
Yes.
Right. So those are important
yes. And the recommendation is well taken. I mean, that's a concern. If you're more comfortable giving the names alone, I mean, that works. But as I said, we will have a conversation, and hopefully we'll land somewhere where, you know, we have not really diluted the process in any way. And that is where we want to go. So as it stands, those are the two primary things that, you know, I wanted to clarify, because the other things that you mentioned, I don't think it's unreasonable. Market value, we know why we asked for it, but I don't think we would have lost anything much.
Tell me why you asked for it. I'm a little curious. And
all right.
see the explanation.
Yes. All right.
The net value?
No, not the net value, the market value. The reason why it was there, you know, of course, over the years, the value of your asset will grow, although it's not based on a valuation in all cases. Some persons do their regular valuations, so it will be good. But when you dispose of it, then you'd be able to have an indication of the difference and how you calculated that amount. So it is important, and that is why we asked for it. And we could ask for it another way, which is why I said we have no difficulty in accepting recommendations with respect to some of those softer things.
So assessing it from a legal perspective, we don't have capital gain tax in Jamaica. In other jurisdictions like Canada, you have. What we have instead is a transfer tax, which is some part of a compensation. What I estimate my market value to be may or may not bear any significance to the real market value. And so again, you know, I just wondered what was a necessity. Because my default, as the chairman has indicated, and it's a problem that we face in this jurisdiction, we make compliance steps so complex that it is the hardest step to take. And then we end up with more non-compliance than compliance. Not saying that the example reflects that, the example of the request for the market value, but to my mind, rationalizing it, I couldn't understand. And so I wondered whether it had to do with your asking what we felt we were worth. But your explanation tells me that it really isn't necessary.
Yes.
So if you're concluding, yes?
Yes. The final point I want to make, and Minister Chuck mentioned, you know, the possible costs of completing your declaration. And I want to say that the Parliament, yourselves, in your wisdom, including Section 44 in the legislation, and it states that for the purposes of Section 13 of the Income Tax Act, any disbursement made and expenses incurred in a year of assessment by a parliamentarian or public official in connection with the preparation of a statutory declaration or other document required to be submitted by him for the purpose of this act shall be deemed to be made or incurred by him wholly or exclusively in acquiring his income for that year of assessment. So they can get reimbursement. So, well, it's not for me, it's in the legislation. I mean, you
have to have the affordability to enable that, Mr. Beresford. But to you know, to your point, though, I think the enablement is very critical in all of this. And we're all about full compliance. Mr. Christie's treatise, as I have dubbed it, was apropos. And he's detailed in getting to the point that our assessment is not just unto ourselves. The rest of the world is looking on, you're assessed and you're categorized, and nobody knows that better than me in my other vocation. So we do understand it. But I wondered a little bit, members, if perhaps, to be fair to you, Mr. Beresford, if perhaps we shouldn't get a third-party look at the declaration form, perhaps a professional look, a Pricewaterhouse look, because I think the objective is to enable full compliance and for you to get the information that is needed and necessary for the perfect evaluation, so that the references that are going to be so important to us in categorizing us by multilaterals and so on would be in line with global standards, but not invasive and not onerous. So I would suggest that if you would, we perhaps have a third-party look, just to make sure that we're not asking for more than is necessary, while at the same time giving our people the best chance possible to be fully compliant, because that's what we're about, isn't it? We start at that. It's not to prosecute anybody, it's to get compliance. It's for us to indicate that we are operating in an integrous and in a transparent manner. And that's what it is about. So let us make it easy for everybody to comply and to comply fully. And you have the full support of this Oversight Committee, Mr. Christie, in that regard. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much. And I just want to say that, as Craig has indicated, our compliance numbers are going up. That says a lot for Jamaica. It says a lot for public servants because it's compliance. And it says that these are the things, incidentally, that Transparency International looks at. These very things. Because it says that we are enhancing standards of good governance and integrity across the public service. And remember, those are the mandates that Parliament, that you've given to us, to ensure that these standards are elevated. And so as the compliance rates go up, it's something that we can take pride in. And we can hold up as an example of good leadership in Parliament and the executive. So I agree wholeheartedly. We can, as Craig has said, continue the discussion to make sure we find that balance. We can demonstrate to investors, our bilateral partners or multilateral partners that we are on the right track to enhance our standards of good governance. And that can only augur well for Jamaica as a country from an economic standpoint, and also to raise the standard of, of our people in terms of their socioeconomic, attaining their socioeconomic potential.
No.
Just to say
just to indicate to you that we did indicate that members are operating in a little time constraint today. Hopefully this will not be the modus operandi for future meetings, but this particular one is a little stressed by my own timelines as well as Member Chuck. But just before you leave, Member Chuck, would you allow Member Malahou Ford to make her observations?
Thank you, Chairman. I note in one of the explanatory notes the size of the budget of the Integrity Commission and the importance of using that budget, as approved by the Parliament. I'm going to ask that you consider spending quite a large amount of it on the public education because of the culture in the society. And you'd be surprised how much you will spend very quickly in order to get that done. And so you won't have to worry whether or not, because, so I'll give you an example. A constituent said to me, so, Madam MP, Christmas coming, Christmas work coming, I expect to get a pay whether or not I work because I'm a long-time supporter of the party. I hear another one said, so, Madam MP, conference is coming. Are we all going to get a stipend just because conference is being held? I know we're not going to Kingston because of the pandemic, but we should all be given something on conference day. I think the ask that many make of public officials, it's an important clue as to the thinking and what they consider to be normal. And there are some who are being cheeky and trying, but there are others who just think it's okay. And then I think an important part of the money should be spent with the persons, the public officials, and the culture within the organizations. I maintain that the face of the public official that you see is going to be the face of government for that part of government that you experience. And even if we're not talking about issues of integrity and corruption, but put it on the flip side of efficiency. if you go to a government counter to be served and you're met with an insolent, rude person who doesn't understand that they're not really doing you a favor in discharging the functions that they're given statutorily and otherwise, you're going to come away feeling that, my God, this is the most uncaring, inefficient place. And if on the other hand you meet someone who really serves you efficiently and effectively, that's the face of government that you will experience. I think it's a lot of the work that needs to be done to achieve the goals which are set out in the functions and duties of the Commission. I'd suggest that consideration be given there.
Chair, may I, through you, respond? Madam AG, thank you very much for your comments. I want to assure the Chair and yourself and the other members of the committee and the Parliament of Jamaica that we are fully cognizant of the importance of ensuring that the money that the taxpayers of this country have spent on our budget, that we get good returns on investment. When I assumed office, we did an assessment of the resources and the organizational structure of the Integrity Commission. Essentially, what we're looking at was, to what extent was we had the resources and the organizational structure to deliver on the 16 mandates that are outlined under Section 6 of the Act. Our gap analysis told us there was a big gap between our capacity and resources on the one hand and our ability to achieve the objectives that have been set to us on the other, in an effective and efficient manner. I had meetings with the then Speaker of the House. I met as well, President of the Senate, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, officials of the Ministry of Finance, explaining to them that, we want to be effective and this is what we require. And I want to say this publicly. The government of Jamaica, the opposition party, and the Parliament of Jamaica have fully supported the Integrity Commission in providing the resources that we have asked for. They have never said no. And it's now for us on this side with the Integrity Commission to hire the staff and to deliver on those objectives. We have been approved at 172 staff in headcount. We have been unable to hire the staff because we have been trying to find new offices to accommodate them. So we have been limited at roughly about 100, and we're about 100 right now in 2 locations. But I'm happy to say that in another 2 months, we will be moving. Actually, the location that we're going to should be ready in another 3 weeks, and we're just completing some procurement issues to allow us to move. So we are proactive in hiring. We've started the hiring process in anticipation, and we'll be actually occupying the new property in January, February. So I'm happy to say that in another 3 or 4 months, 5 months, we should be up to our full standard. If you take, for example, investigation, Kevin's division, it's about 57, his complement, but he has just about 29 right now. Corruption prevention, you spoke about education. We crafted a brand new division just to address corruption from the preventative side. The way the law was written, and you're familiar with it, Madam AG, 3 statutory divisions were outlined. Information and complaints, investigation and corruption prosecution, but there's nothing on corruption prevention. How do you prevent corruption? You, Chair, made the point that we're not out to prosecute people and lock up people. We would much prefer to prevent corruption. And so we articulated that objective, and it found favor with the Ministry of Finance, and it found favor with the Parliamentary Committee, which is established under Section 35 of the Act, to approve our staff. And it was chaired by Madam Speaker. And it's a 19-member division, and it's headed by Director Ryan. And I'm going to ask him to say a few words. But that division, we're currently recruiting staff, and it's with the hope that by March, April, we should have the full complement, and we will be doing, that's where you're going to see the public education. So I just, if I could just allow Director Ryan just to make a few comments on...
Before he comes in, just to say that your comment to the committee when we last met about feeling comatose left me with a lot of food for thought. That comment and the report and the comments in the media left me with much food for thought. And I confess that my preference is always to work quietly behind the scene and be effective instead of in the public's face. And I truly wondered whether the balance was being struck, again in the ask, because the provision, which they call the gag provision, is one that you're asking for revision. And I just thought that if much of the work is put on that, then believe me, you would be seen as fully alive and kicking and not comatose at all.
Thank you. Members of the House, Chairman of the Committee, the Executive Director, thank you for your comments earlier regarding the work of the division. Just to highlight that, thank you. Section 6 of the Act, the Integrity Commission Act 2017, highlights about 16 functions of the work of the Commission. 11 of those functions relate to the work of the Corruption Prevention Division, definitely. And if we interrogate Section 6, and I won't be exhaustive, but I've broken it down, starting at CES, take necessary and effective measures for the prevention of corruption within public bodies. We have over roughly 200 public bodies, and if we include the ministries as well, we're looking at about 216 or so MDAs, yes? And we have to interrogate that, We have to examine the practices and processes of public bodies and make recommendations. D. Yes, definitely. Sure.
Interject,
no
but
problem.
that one mandating you to prepare codes of conduct and other advisory material relating to corruption and guide public bodies in respect of matters within the purview of this act. Yes.
Definitely.
You won't be comatose doing that work?
Not at all, not at all. In fact, we have put together a master plan for the work of the division, which the commissioners have approved, and we really intend to aggressively and accelerate initiatives in this regard. It also speaks to looking at international best practices, coordinate the implementation of an anti-corruption strategy, which is a key part of the work of the division, because, again, that is lacking. A huge part of the anti-corruption approach has been in a silo-type arrangement, and we need to have a cohesive document that looks at corruption and say, how can we tackle corruption in Jamaica for the next 10, 15 years?
So
and
there
put
is
together
one at the end which says, determine the extent of financial loss and such other losses to public bodies.
Yes, that again is also a part of
Can't be comatose doing that work?
Not at all, not at all. Which is why, again, the work of the division, we have to get the staff in and begin the interrogation. It also speaks to, and let me just go back, to the anti-corruption strategy. There's a huge part of the approach of the work of the division. How can we get ownership and stakeholder participation to craft that document, that it's a whole of society approach as opposed to a whole of government approach, because the Act does in fact provide us with a mandate to work with the private sector and other key stakeholders in advancing the anti-corruption drive. The important point you mentioned, Attorney General, is the issue of adopting and strengthening mechanisms to educate the public, a key part of the mandate. And the intention of the division is we plan to launch, and we have started work in that regard, an anti-corruption and good governance workshop series. And you would have been part of the intervention with the ministers of government last year, the cabinet that was a part of that training. We in fact started training with the shadow cabinet, similar to what transpired for the ministers last year, last week, and we intend to roll that out. And we also plan to roll out the series within public bodies as well. We have actually started, we're almost completed training with the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission, over 140 employees. And we plan to roll out that particular workshop series across the public sector until we have covered all public servants. And in addition to that as well, roll that program out in the private sector as well. So we have had stakeholder consultations. We have met with, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, the Jamaica Civil Service Association, etc., to roll out that particular program and to get the buy-in for the aims of the program. So, thank you.
Actually, I think that's what, when I met with the ED, just ahead of the start of this oversight committee under my chairmanship, those were the essence of our discussion. We focus heavily on prevention. We focus heavily on empowerment, giving the declarants the tools to respond effectively, efficiently, and timely. And nothing is better than carrying that program throughout to cover the 200 and almost 50 MDAs, and that's substantial. And so, you know, the member Malahoo is quite right. You will have your hands full, and you will not be giving you a moment to sleep. I didn't use comatose, remember? In closing, I'd like to indicate that we did some good work today. We've taken into account these very carefully and studied responses that have been given to us, the three key ones that we will be looking at. We also would want to look a little deeper on the declarant form and to perhaps have interregnum discussions with you in that regard, and possibility for a third party evaluation, just to make sure that when we come back in the new year, that is a new session of Parliament, we would have been placed in a position to conclude on these matters and to present them to Parliament for consideration. We have been talking about the Integrity Commission carrying through the public education program for parliamentarians, as was done for Cabinet. And there's a 2-week period that we think, I was just talking with the Speaker, that is useful, so we can look at together and determine whether those 2 weeks in February, when the budget is being considered by the Auditor General, during those 2 weeks, we could have a few sessions with you, with the parliamentarians. So the Speaker's office will confirm with you and the Clerk of the House in terms of that arrangement. Very well.
Chair, it will be a privilege, and we look forward to working with you and Madam Speaker to make that a reality. It's a part of our objective. As we have indicated, we started with the Cabinet. The process has started with the shadow Cabinet, the opposition. We're doing the permanent secretaries group, and then we're also going to be targeting the accounting officers of our major public bodies. So we're taking key public sector officials, step by step. But we would be happy to go the next round to extend that initiative to our parliamentarians. And if I may, Chair, Director Craig just had one little comment that he wanted to make, if you could allow him.
We have to be out here no later than 12:30, so make sure it is a little comment.
Very small but important, Chair. I just want to say that the thrust of the Commission is to put this whole issue of statutory declaration in a very positive light. So we're focusing primarily on certification. And I think it will also go well for us as a country with respect to our ranking, if we can show that of the 40,000 persons who will be complying, that most, 90 upwards, have been properly certified. And that's the objective. And that is why we have been reaching out much more now to our declarants, requesting that they provide certain information, because we want accurate declarations so that we can certify the declarants. So that's the positive spin that we are putting on it.
With you 100%, but the efficiency that is inherent in the document and the ease with which it can be complied with are valuable tools to achieve that objective. It makes certification so much easier when the efficiencies are complied with. All right, well, thank you so much. Just before the motion of adjournment, yes?
Well, Chairman, we had moved the motion to defer consideration and approval of the minutes to the end of the meeting. I suspect that time will not permit us, so I would like to amend that resolution to have it deferred for the next meeting. There are a number of items that we have to follow up on from last time's deliberation, some of which have
What I would suggest is that members read very carefully the minutes that are presented, because I have, and I agree that there are a few items there that would require consideration, certainly for the next session, but even before the next session, because certain legislative arrangements can be put in place before the next session, and we would urge that members who have that responsibility would do the necessary preparations for it to be done. So thank you so much, team. It has been a very, very good discussion, very informative, and I think that the Oversight Committee is fully seized with what our responsibilities are, and we are very satisfied that the Commission is pursuing its path well, and we want to make sure that we all achieve that great objective of 100% compliance and 100% certification. Thank you. Thank you. This meeting of the Integrity Oversight Committee is now adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Jamaica, home of the resilient, passionate and hard-working. A people and a nation who have achieved and defied all odds, working to keep their economy growing, their country thriving, from investments made in innovative opportunities and exports demanded globally. We have a vision, now within our grasp, where Jamaica becomes the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. We will not let go of this vision. We will grow. We will overcome these challenging times and look to the future with hope and positivity. These are special times. The world as we know it has changed, but home will always be in our hearts. And in Jamaica, you can always find a home. Think you know Jamaica? Look again. You will be surprised.
What if they knew that you abused her? Her family?
Mr. Jones,